Welcome everyone to another Fanboy Frenzy. This time something totally different. We're bringing to you a video edition of our Entertelligence podcast. Entertelligence, we created that a couple of years ago because we wanted to have discussions about issues or topics that we felt were more controversial, politically or socially or perhaps even scientific issues. Matters of debate, if you will. Essentially like listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, kind of along the same lines. And our tagline for Entertelligence was, this is the crossroad of entertainment and intelligence. And I hope that today we are able to offer both of those to you in mass. And the subject is quite a hot one. And that is the Bible and evolution mutually exclusive? Did I say mutually? I think I added 4 L's in there, but you get what I'm saying. Are they mutually exclusive? Being somebody who's been on both sides of the aisle, I think the answer might shock you as we delve a little deeper into this. We're going to spend just a few minutes going over what I like to consider the bullet points for how I don't think the Bible and evolution are necessarily mutually exclusive. Make sure you comment and subscribe to this particular channel if you like videos just like this. And, more importantly, if you'd like to see a more in-depth documentary style video about this subject, please make sure you comment below and we'll make sure and make that happen for you, Fanboy Frenzy Army. Now, without further ado, is the Bible and evolution mutually exclusive? I've heard this for a long time. Being somebody that was brought up in church, 1989 is an important year for this guy. Not only did the Batman with Michael Keaton come out, which is the greatest Batman movie of all time, but I also was baptized. And so very early on in my life, I was brought up thinking about the Bible and whether it's true, not true, etc. Now, obviously, many years have passed by and I've done so many different things. I've done a lot of soul searching. I've done a lot of study. As a matter of fact, I even studied evolution pretty extensively. Come to think about it, I thought I would actually offer a little prop here in the video to show that I'm not one of these libertarians out here just trying to criticize everybody, but never really took any time to study what I'm going to talk about. So I'm reading on the origin of species. Okay, I read this book quite a bit. You know what? And it's hard to explain how I feel when I actually read this book, but I think SpongeBob can help me explain how I feel when I'm reading this book. And go.
Great. Yeah, fascinating. No pictures, just the way I like it.
Pretty much identifies it clearly. No pictures, just the way I like it. I've put a lot of time and effort into studying evolution and studying creationism and studying dimethyl or DMT, whatever you call it. Studying all kinds of different theories about life and the history of the universe because I find all that quite interesting. But when it comes down to the Bible and evolution, I want to talk a little bit about Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. The Bible starts off saying something pretty profound, and that is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Verse 2 says, the earth was without form and void. Now, in between those two verses, there is a theory that was postulated back in the 18th century, and it was called the gap theory. And what the gap theory suggests, and what I happen to be someone who's a proponent of, is that between verses 1 and 2, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, boom, stop. Don't say anything else, because we don't know if it's billions, trillions, or tens of trillions of years old. We have no idea. All we know is that something created the heavens and the earth. And then all of a sudden, verse 2 in the Bible, now the earth is destroyed. So as somebody who tries to approach something from a biblical perspective, how can I rationalize those two? Because it doesn't make sense. I mean, even if you see how God created Adam. God created Adam at an adult age. We don't know the exact age. Some people specify that maybe he was the age of Jesus when he died, around 33. But again, that's not outlined. That's just man's opinion put into the scriptures. So, with that being said, Adam was of full age, the Bible says. Eve, when he created Eve also at full age. The Bible also said that he created the fowls of the air, the fish of the sea, and all the creeping things upon the earth. So Everything that was created, the firmament and the sky, the land, everything, the waters, were created at a point when they could be utilized and did not need to evolve per se. They were created perfect and at full age. So, what in the world could have happened where in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, verse 1, and then all of a sudden in verse 2, it looks like absolute chaos. As Jim Ross used to say, pretty much explains what must have happened on the earth. Now, let's go to evolution. Evolution comes in two different theories essentially, and I may botch these completely, so please don't knock me too bad. But I think the first one is called phyletic gradualism. And phyletic gradualism means incremental change over time. In other words, it means faith. All right? Now, the second theory for evolution is punctuated equilibrium. Now, what is punctuated equilibrium? Punctuated equilibrium essentially means swift and fast change. Now, I'm going to read something that was written by Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is one of the most prominent atheists. He's what I like to call the poke and prod atheist, the one who comes after anybody that believes in anything other than evolution, especially if you're a person of faith. He likes to poke and prod you a little bit. But this is what he said about the creation of the universe. He says, we have no evidence, quote, we have no evidence about what the first step in making life was, but we do know the kind of step it must have been. It must have been whatever it took to get natural selection started. Before that first step, the sort of improvement that only natural selection can achieve were impossible. By some process, as of yet unknown, of a self-replicating entity. So Richard Dawkins felt that something had to have happened, must have happened, to create the life that we all see today, the galaxies, the stars. Not only the life that we see today, but the life that continues to show up that scientists see in astronomy, life that continues to grow and adapt. We find new solar systems all the time, new planets, new specimens. I mean, the universe that we live in is absolutely chopped full of wonder. But the question is, again, is the Bible and evolution mutually exclusive? I want to talk a little bit about after Adam and Eve were created. The Bible says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, God commands Adam to go out, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. Many Christians, it may be going through Sunday school. I'm sure you've heard that many, many times. But there's something in there that people don't usually catch. God tells Adam, be fruitful, multiply, replenish. Now, anybody that's ever studied the Bible will know that the Old Testament is written primarily in Hebrew, and the New Testament's written primarily in Greek. And so the Old Testament word in Hebrew literally means replenish, like the equivalent of restocking shelves. But wait a minute. I thought Adam was the first person. I thought Adam was the first dude ever to be on the earth, if you believe the Bible record. Well, something obviously does not add up in this story. Let me take it a step further. If anybody knows about Lucifer, the son of the morning, the Bible says, I beheld Lucifer cast out of heaven like lightning. And the Bible says that Lucifer weakened the nations. So the Bible implies that from the minute he was cast from the heavens, he began to weaken nations. Now, there's an animal that is referenced in the story of creation that happened to tempt Eve, if you recall. Who was it or what was it? The Bible says it was a serpent. The Bible also says that serpent, it references Satan. Okay? Well, the Bible says that from the minute Lucifer was cast from the heavens, all of a sudden, he began to weaken nations. Well, what nations are there? This is where that gap theory comes into place. Because many Christians, especially people that were theological, or people that were what we call theologians, they began to notice that something's not right. If God cast Satan down to the earth, Satan was already on the earth, and all of a sudden now the earth was without form and void, there may have been what we don't call normal creation, but recreation. And so what I would postulate is the fact that many of the hominids that scientists have found that seem to be some type of a transition between a human or an ape and a human, it's possible that they may have been from a previous creation that's not written about in the Bible. Now, before you start freaking out on me about the possibility of a recreation, I want you to stop and do a Google search. I cannot remember the scientist or the archaeologist's name at this particular point, but he's actually been on Joe Rogan's podcast a couple of different times. And he postulates that actually, if you go back to the Egyptian pyramids, that the Egyptians were, their culture is not merely thousands of years old, but that perhaps the culture was tens of thousands of years old. And that there are parts of our history as a civilization where we were much more evolved. I mean, even if you take the Sphinx and some of the great architecture that you can find in Egypt and other parts of the world, we can't even duplicate it today with our technology. And so it tends to at least possibly push towards a fact or perhaps an opinion that something's happened to our culture, humanity, where we've either devolved or whether there was some type of cataclysm, be it flood or asteroids. I mean, we know that the Earth is pelted by asteroids and meteors all the time because those same asteroids are hitting other planets and sending debris here all the time. And so we know that there's been a lot of, cataclysms in our world as we know it. But if you just stop and think for a minute and think about some of these structures and how the Sphinx and all these different, pyramids actually happen to speak to heavenly signs and astronomy and astrology, we might not think that it's so hard to believe that there may have been a creation before the biblical creation, but God happened to omit it for a reason that we don't yet understand, or perhaps have finally got the technology to begin to understand for ourselves. I mean, if you stop and think about it really, the Bible and evolution are almost the same. What I mean by that is if you listen to Richard Dawkins, he believes in seeding. And if you don't believe me, listen to this.
It could come about in the following way. It could be that at some earlier time, somewhere in the universe, a civilization evolved by probably some kind of Darwinian means to a very, very high level of technology and designed a form of life that they seeded onto, perhaps this planet. Now, that is a possibility and an intriguing possibility. And I suppose it's possible that you might find evidence for that if you look at the details of biochemistry, molecular biology. You might find a signature of some sort of designer.
So let me get this straight. Richard Dawkins believes that an alien life force happened to plant the seed of life so that we could crawl from the primordial sludge out onto land as a single cell organism and then all of a sudden become a complex organism. So it sounds a whole lot to me that Richard Dawkins believes the story of creation in the Bible just without God, insert alien here. So the question would be is, how? How can that be? A man of science, a man of intellect, a man that likes to really poke his finger and his nose in everybody's business and really push the buttons of anybody in a faith-based community. And even he believes that some force outside our earth helped to plant the initial seeds of life. Or at least that is one theory. So the question is again, could it be that the Bible and evolution actually are not mutually exclusive, but perhaps some of the creatures that we're finding are simply from a previous creation, or as the gap theory would put it, a recreation? Now obviously for some of you out here, you may never have heard of this. This may be something totally new to you, foreign if you will. But it's been going around in Christendom for well over 200 plus years. And sometimes there are writings going back into the 16th century that even reference some of these theories. But I want to know, what do you guys think? If you were brought up in church, did you ever hear a pastor talk about the gap theory? If you weren't brought up in church, do you think personally that there's any way that the Bible and evolution can somehow maybe not be mutually exclusive, but perhaps what that creation of life, that whatever started the process for evolution may not have been something so magical as an alien, but maybe it was that biblical creator. Who knows? I mean, I'm a fan of Joe Rogan, for example, and he considers everybody higher primates. Now, for me personally, I feel like that all of us have been created. That's my opinion. But I also feel that, in my humble opinion, it's not as much evolution as it is adaptation. And I think even fossil records show that much. But if you guys have found this video interesting in its short duration, if you guys would like to see a much more in-depth commentary on this particular subject, make sure you let us know. Either go to facebook.com/Fanboy Frenzy and make sure that you post a comment or do a direct message and let us know what you think. Or you can even email us, Hyperion Mailbox at fanboyfrenzy.com, or obviously just put a comment below and let me know what you think. But there is something also I want to discuss in brief. That is that the world has so much conflict in it that it's really ironic that we always want to find something to argue about. And so for those of you out there, Fanboy Frenzy Army, that completely disagree with my perspective, or at least my approach to this particular argument, I can understand that. But let me leave you with this. If you study the scriptural story of the serpent and him being, essentially leading Eve on to this, turning and rebelling against God, I want you to go back and read the story real quick before you comment below. And I want you to notice one thing. The serpent didn't start off crawling. The serpent must have walked. And even scientists have noticed things on the bottom of snakes that seem to identify that perhaps they used to, pre-evolutionary or pre-phyletic gradualism, that perhaps they actually did walk. But the Bible, the curse to the serpent for, tempting Eve in that manner, was for him to crawl on his face for the rest of his days, slither in the sand, so to speak. So is that evolution? Did the Bible just happen to guess on that? Or is there something that our human mind cannot comprehend? Till next time, this is Ryan Jarvis from Fanboy Frenzy, and we'll see you soon.